We live in the most surveilled era in human history. Your phone knows your location, facial recognition scans the streets, and your DNA is indexed in a dozen databases. Yet, right now, in morgues and cemeteries across America, there are 40,000 people who have no name. This is what experts call the silent mass disaster, a crisis of the forgotten hidden in plain sight. Today, we are looking at why thousands of people are found every year, but never identified, and the new technology that is finally giving the nameless their voices back. The phrase silent mass disaster isn't a hyperbole created for sensationalism. It's the official term used by the National Institute of Justice to describe a systemic failure of unprecedented proportions. When a natural catastrophe strikes, resources flood the zone and the identification process is prioritized with urgency and national attention. But the unidentified dead represent a catastrophe occurring in slow motion, spread across decades and thousands of different jurisdictions. It is a fragmented crisis where every missing persons report that fails to find a match becomes a cold trail, and every body found without an ID becomes a permanent resident of a cold storage locker. This disconnect creates a black hole in our justice system, where the basic human right to an identity is simply lost to the bureaucracy of death. To truly grasp the scale of this issue, consider that 40,000 individuals represent a mid-sized city of ghosts. Every year, approximately 4,400 unidentified human remains are recovered in the United States alone. While many are eventually identified within a year, about 1,000 remain anonymous annually, joining the ever-growing backlog of the nameless. These are the victims of foul play, tragic accidents, or extreme social isolation, people who lived, breathed, and loved, now reduced to a case number and a list of physical descriptors in the nameless database. The sheer volume of these cases has overwhelmed local medical examiners' offices, many of which lack the funding or the specialized forensic expertise to do more than the bare minimum before the trail goes cold. The weight of becoming a John or Jane Doe extends far beyond the sterile walls of a morgue. It is a profound psychological erasure that echoes through generations. For the families left behind, it is a state of perpetual purgatory known as ambiguous loss, a grief that cannot be processed because there is no certainty, no ritual of goodbye, and no finality. For the unidentified individual, it is the ultimate indignity to be stripped of their history and their name at the very moment they are most vulnerable. This anonymity often acts as a shield for criminals, as a murder without a victim's name is exponentially harder to solve. The nameless are not just a forensic problem, they are a moral one, challenging our society's promise that no one will be forgotten. Why, in a world where we are constantly tracked, do so many people remain invisible? The answer lies in the systemic gaps between local, state, and federal agencies that have existed for nearly a century. For decades, fingerprint records were stored in silos, dental records were paper-based and localized, and DNA technology was too expensive for routine use. Many of these individuals were marginalized during their lives, homeless, struggling with mental health, or estranged from their families, making it less likely that a missing persons report was ever filed. This marks the beginning of our journey to understand how these people fell through the cracks and how we are finally using cutting-edge science to bridge the gap between the living and the lost. The illusion of a seamless forensic network is perhaps the greatest myth in modern true crime. We've been conditioned by television to believe that a single keystroke in a dimly lit laboratory can bridge the gap between a nameless body and a grieving family. But the reality is far more chaotic. In the United States alone, the investigative landscape is a patchwork of over 18,000 independent law enforcement agencies, each operating within its own jurisdiction, its own protocols, and its own technological limitations. This isn't just a matter of bureaucratic red tape, it is a fundamental breakdown of communication that allows thousands of individuals to vanish into the cracks of a system that was supposed to protect their identities. When data is siloed behind departmental walls, the truth becomes a casualty of geography. At the heart of this crisis is the staggering fragmentation between local, state, and federal databases. While the FBI maintains the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC, it is not a catch-all safety net. Many local jurisdictions lack the resources or the legal mandate to upload comprehensive biological data into national systems like nameless. Imagine a puzzle where the pieces are scattered across 50 different rooms and the doors are all locked. A missing persons report filed in a small town in Ohio might never cross-reference with an unidentified set of remains discovered just across the border in Pennsylvania. These databases are often non-interoperable, meaning they don't speak to one another automatically. We are living in an era of high-speed information, yet our most critical forensic data travels at the speed of manual entry and clerical whim. This leads us to the missing versus unidentified gap, a dark demographic void where the names of the lost and the descriptions of the found never meet. It is a statistical haunting. There are currently tens of thousands of active missing persons cases and an equally staggering number of unidentified remains sitting in morgues and cold storage facilities. The tragedy is that statistically, many of these unidentified individuals are already in the system as missing. However, because of inconsistent data entry, missing dental records, lack of familial DNA, or simply a misspelled name, the link is never forged. It is a mirror image failure, a mother looking for a son and a medical examiner looking for a name, both staring at the same digital wall from opposite sides, unable to see through the administrative fog. Beneath these procedural failures lies the harsh reality of economics, the crushing weight of budget constraints, and the resulting backlog in medical examiners' offices. Forensic pathology is a field under siege. Many counties operate with a fraction of the funding required to handle their caseloads, leading to a triage mentality, where cold cases are perpetually pushed to the bottom of the pile. DNA sequencing, the gold standard for modern identification, is expensive and time-consuming. When a laboratory is forced to process a kit for an active murder trial or identify a set of John Doe remains from 10 years ago, the living almost always take precedence. The result is a silent accumulation of the forgotten, boxes of skeletal remains stored in off-site warehouses, waiting for a budget increase that may never come. The system isn't just broken, it's bankrupt, leaving thousands of families in a state of permanent, unresolved grief. In the cold calculus of forensic science, time is the ultimate enemy of identity. When a body is discovered months or even years after death, the environment has often already claimed the most vital clues needed for a name. Decomposition is not merely a biological process, it is a systematic erasure of history. In humid climates, soft tissue can vanish in weeks, taking with it the unique contours of a face, the specific color of an eye, or the telltale scars that a mother or a sibling might recognize. Even the skeleton, which we often view as a permanent record, can be scattered by scavengers or degraded by acidic soil until the DNA itself becomes too fragmented to sequence. When we encounter a Jane or John Doe, we are often looking at someone who has been physically dismantled by the very earth they walked upon, leaving investigators to piece together a puzzle where half the pieces have already dissolved. Beyond the physical degradation, we must confront the failure of the bureaucratic machine. We like to believe we live in an age of total surveillance, but for many, the paper trail ends long before their life does. Transient populations, migrants, runaways, and the chronically unhoused often exist in the administrative shadows. Identification frequently relies on a baseline of societal participation that many of these individuals lacked. If a person was never arrested, never served in the military, and never had access to consistent dental care, their fingerprints and X-rays do not exist in any searchable database. This lack of a digital or physical anchor makes traditional forensic methods useless. Without a record to compare against, a fingerprint is just a pattern, and a dental bridge is just a piece of metal, offering no bridge back to a name. This leads us to the most heartbreaking factor, the phenomenon of social death. Long before their physical heart stops beating, many unidentified victims experience a profound isolation that severs their connection to the collective consciousness. Social death occurs when an individual is no longer seen, heard, or searched for by the world around them. This is often the result of severe mental illness, addiction, or a series of tragic life events that burn every bridge to the past. When no one files a missing persons report, the investigation is dead on arrival. A body remains nameless because there is no one on the outside looking for the human being who once inhabited it. In these cases, the silence of the living is far louder and more obstructive than the silence of the dead. The synthesis of these factors, the biological, the bureaucratic, and the social, creates the perfect storm for anonymity. While modern breakthroughs like investigative genetic genealogy are beginning to pierce this veil, they still struggle against the sheer weight of decades of neglect. To remain nameless in the 21st century is a haunting testament to how easily a human being can fall through the cracks of a world that claims to be more connected than ever. These individuals are not just mysteries to be solved, they are reminders of the fragile threads that hold our identities together. They stay nameless because in many cases, society had already stopped calling their names years before they took their final breath. Walk into any police headquarters in the country, and you will likely find a room that feels heavier than the rest. This is where the cold case wall lives, a physical or digital archive of names that have no faces, and faces that have no names. Consider the archetypal case of the Walker County Jane Doe, a young woman found in 1980 who remained a ghost for over 40 years. For decades, her files sat on a shelf, a testament to the limitations of 20th century forensics. Detectives back then did everything by the book. They took fingerprints, they circulated composite sketches, and they waited for a phone call that never came. The tragedy of a Jane Doe isn't just that they died, but that their identity was erased by time, leaving a void where a life story should be. This is the first layer of the wall, the silence of the unidentified that lingers for generations. As we moved into the 90s and early 2000s, the world thought science had finally solved the puzzle with the advent of DNA profiling. Enter CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. It was hailed as the ultimate weapon against anonymity. However, CODIS had a massive, systemic flaw that many people outside the law enforcement community don't realize. It is a closed loop. For a DNA sample from a crime scene to trigger a hit, the perpetrator or the victim must already be in the system, typically through a prior felony conviction. CODIS was designed to catch repeat offenders, not to identify a missing person from a stable home who had never touched the legal system. If your DNA wasn't in that specific government database, you were essentially invisible to the software. For decades, thousands of Jane and John Does remained stuck behind this technological barrier, their genetic code sitting in a freezer with nowhere to go. Beyond the science, there's the human element of bureaucracy, which often acts as a secondary wall. Jurisdictional lines are perhaps the most frustrating obstacles in any long-term investigation. In the past, if a body was found just 10 miles across a state line, the information might never reach the precinct where the original missing person report was filed. We are talking about an era of paper files, Polaroid photos, and physical evidence stored in cardboard boxes and basement lockers. There was no centralized, searchable national database that spoke across county lines effectively. A detective in Texas could be looking for a girl who was sitting in a morgue in Oklahoma, but because the paperwork didn't travel, the connection was never made. These silos of information allowed cases to freeze over as files were passed from retiring detectives to new recruits who had no personal connection to the victim. Time itself is the final brick in the cold case wall. With every year that passes, the physical evidence degrades, and more importantly, the human memory fades. Witnesses move away, families pass away, and the social context of the disappearance evaporates. In many of these decades-old cases, the original crime scene no longer exists. It might be a shopping mall now or a paved highway. When a case hits the 20-year mark, it enters a dangerous zone where it transitions from a living investigation to a historical curiosity. The urgency dies down, the media stops calling, and the wall becomes a permanent fixture of the department. This is the reality of the backlog, a mountain of unsolved mysteries waiting for a key that hadn't been invented yet. Looking back at these decades of stagnation, it is easy to feel a sense of hopelessness. We had the bodies, we had the evidence, and we eventually had the DNA, but we lacked the bridge to connect them to a family tree. The limitations were both structural and scientific, creating a perfect storm of anonymity. However, as we stand in the present day, we are witnessing the first major cracks appearing in that wall. The transition from traditional forensic science to the era of investigative genetic genealogy is nothing short of a revolution. But to understand how we are breaking these walls down today, we must first respect the sheer height of the obstacles that kept these secrets buried for over half a century. The cold case wall was never just about a lack of effort, it was about a lack of tools. We have reached a point in history where time is no longer the primary enemy of justice. For decades, cold cases were buried under layers of dust and bureaucratic stagnation, waiting for a miracle that the 20th century simply couldn't provide. But today, that miracle is here, and it is encoded in our very biology. Welcome to the era of investigative genetic genealogy, or IGG. This is a total revolution that has fundamentally transformed the landscape of forensic science, turning distant relatives into unwitting witnesses and long-forgotten DNA samples into digital roadmaps. The traditional methods, matching a suspect's profile directly to a criminal database like CODIS, are rapidly becoming the old guard. Now, we do not need the killer's DNA to be on file. We only need a second cousin twice removed who once uploaded a kit to trace their ancestry to blow a case wide open. Leading this charge are specialized labs in organizations like Othram and the DNA Doe Project. These are not your standard police laboratories. They are high-tech hubs of forensic puzzle solving. Authworth, for instance, focuses on the difficult samples, DNA that is severely degraded, contaminated, or decades old. They use advanced sequencing techniques that go far beyond the capabilities of state labs, building profiles from almost nothing. Meanwhile, the DNA Doe project utilizes a massive network of dedicated volunteer genealogists who spend thousands of hours building intricate family trees for unidentified victims. Together, they are closing cases that were deemed unsolvable by the best detectives of the 1970s and 80s. Every week, a name is restored to a body, or a killer is identified, often decades after they thought they had successfully escaped into the shadows of history. However, this unprecedented power comes with a heavy set of ethical questions that we are only just beginning to navigate. When you upload your DNA to a public genealogy site to find out your heritage, you are effectively entering your entire biological family into a permanent, searchable police lineup. This is the core of the modern privacy debate. Critics argue that these public databases were never intended for law enforcement surveillance and that users cannot consent for their relatives. Proponents, however, argue that the collective right to justice for murder victims should outweigh an individual's desire for genetic anonymity. Major platforms like GED Match have been forced to implement complex opt-in features, creating a delicate balance between public safety and personal privacy rights. As we look toward the future, the message to those who think they can hide is clear: the shadows are shrinking. We are living in a time where a single stray hair or a microscopic drop of blood left 50 years ago can be reconstructed into a full identity today. The genetic revolution is not just a technical upgrade, it is a paradigm shift. It tells every perpetrator that their identity is no longer theirs to hide. It is written in the blood of their family, waiting to be decoded. As technology continues to sharpen, the concept of a perfect crime is becoming a relic of the past. In this new world, the question is no longer if a cold case can be solved, but simply how long it will take for the genealogy to point back to the truth. Behind every cold case file and every composite sketch lies a profound, invisible weight that rarely makes the headlines. We often focus on the mechanics of the crime, but the true human cost of anonymity is measured in the decades of silence endured by those left behind. In psychology, there is a specific term for this agony: ambiguous loss. Unlike a traditional death where a ritual of mourning provides a definitive end, the families of the unidentified live in a permanent state of limbo. Their grief is frozen in time, caught between the desperate hope that their loved one is still alive and the crushing need for a body to bury. This lack of closure is a form of psychological torture that prevents the brain from processing trauma, turning every ringing phone or every news report of a discovered body into a potential, yet terrifying, revelation. This burden does not stop with the families. It extends deeply into the lives of the investigators who carry these nameless files home with them. For a detective or a forensic pathologist, an unidentified victim isn't just a number. They are a puzzle that refuses to be solved, a human being who has been stripped of their most basic right, an identity. The emotional toll of working these cases is cumulative. Investigators often describe a sense of personal failure every year a John Doe remains nameless, as if they are the only ones left to hold a visual for someone the world has forgotten. They pore over dental records and DNA markers, not just out of professional duty, but as an act of restoration. To them, these victims are ghosts demanding to be seen, and the pressure to give them their names back can lead to secondary traumatic stress that lasts an entire career. But why does a single identification matter so much to a society that never knew the victim? The answer lies in our collective sense of justice and dignity. Every time a Jane Doe is finally identified, it sends a ripple through the entire community, mending a tear in the social fabric that many didn't even know existed. Anonymity is a void that suggests a person's life was inconsequential, but an identification asserts the opposite, that no one is disposable. It provides a historical correction, ensuring that a person's story doesn't end as a footnote in a police ledger. When we restore a name, we aren't just solving a mystery, we are performing a vital act of humanity that reaffirms the value of every individual life. In the present day, as technology bridges the gap between the lost and the found, we are realizing that the cost of anonymity was never just about the dead. It was about the living who were forced to carry the silence. Every name recovered is a victory against the erasure of time. It is the final piece of a fractured narrative that allows a family to finally say goodbye, an investigator to finally close a drawer, and a community to finally acknowledge a neighbor they never knew they had lost. The quest to identify the nameless is, at its core, a fight to ensure that in our modern world, no one is truly forgotten. In the shadows of our modern world, a silent epidemic persists. Thousands of bodies found every year that remain nameless, known only by the cold classification of Jane or John Doe. This isn't just a logistical backlog, it's a failure of our collective memory and a profound loss of human identity. To solve this crisis, we have to look beyond traditional police work and embrace a system designed to connect the dots across state lines and decades of silence. The first step in dismantling this epidemic is visibility. We cannot find what we are not looking for, and we cannot identify those who have been forgotten by a system that was, for a long time, tragically fragmented. We are living in an era where the tools for resolution exist, but they require our active participation to function effectively. This is where NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, becomes our most powerful weapon. Managed by the Department of Justice, it serves as a centralized clearinghouse that allows law enforcement, medical examiners, and, crucially, the general public to access and share data. Before NamUs, information was often trapped in dusty filing cabinets or local databases that didn't talk to each other. Now, a family member in Oregon can search for a loved one who went missing 20 years ago and find a potential match in a doe found in Florida. This level of transparency and cross-referencing is revolutionary, turning every citizen with an internet connection into a potential investigator. It bridges the gap between the missing and the found, ensuring that no case ever truly goes cold as long as the data remains accessible and updated. But technology has evolved even further, moving from simple data entry to the very blueprint of our existence, DNA. You might have taken a commercial DNA test to find your ancestors, but that same data holds the key to solving decades-old mysteries. Platforms like GED Match allow individuals to opt in and share their genetic profiles with law enforcement investigators. When a doe's DNA is uploaded, forensic genealogists can build out massive family trees, narrowing down the identity of the deceased through their distant relatives. This is crowdsourced justice in its purest form. By simply checking a box to allow law enforcement access to your genetic data, you could be the missing link that identifies a person who has been nameless for 40 years. It's a profound shift in the power dynamic of true crime. The public is no longer just a spectator. We are an active part of the solution. Ultimately, the goal of this entire infrastructure is to restore dignity to the nameless. Every unidentified person was someone's child, someone's friend, or someone's neighbor. They had a favorite song, a unique laugh, and a story that was cut short by tragedy or time. When we identify a John Doe, we aren't just closing a file or fulfilling a legal requirement, we are returning a person to their family and giving them their history back. This is the final frontier of forensic science, a blend of high-tech genealogy and raw human compassion. By supporting these systems, by staying informed, and by participating in the process, we can ensure that the silent epidemic eventually becomes a thing of the past. No one should be forgotten, and no story should end without a name. It is time we bring them all home.